everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today I will talk to you a little bit about how I got into MIT Sloan and why I love it. Let's get started. There are a million stories that I can tell about why MBA, how I got here, what was I doing before, and so on. But today, because of the approaching deadlines for MBA applications, I will focus primarily just on how I approach the application process and what it is like to apply to MIT Sloan. In the future videos, I would love to share more about my experiences, what I've observed in the school, and how you can make your decisions when it comes to MBA. I started my MBA application process really back in July 2020. That's when I first started preparing for my GMAT exam. For most of the MBA programs, GMAT is the most common standardized test that many schools require. That was the peak of COVID. Everybody was working from home remotely. I always had this idea of going back to school, so I wanted to give it a shot to see if I could tackle this standardized test before I even started researching about different schools and so on. After I took my GMAT, luckily I was able to get the score that I wanted. I applied to MIT Sloan in December 2021. The reason for such a big gap was primarily due to my consideration around COVID. I wasn't sure if I wanted a virtual experience at all. I would love to be in person for my MBA, so I decided to actually delay my application process by 1 year. I really only started researching in 2021 and finally got to the application stage in December 2021. Round 2 application deadline was January 2022. For those of you who are not familiar with the process, most MBA schools these days in the US and worldwide have 3 rounds of applications. The first round is typically due in August or September. And the second round is due in December or January. Finally, there's usually a third round in May or June. That was a little bit about the timeline. I actually wanted to touch on a few aspects of the application process that's not commonly discussed, and things and information that I found particularly useful but took me a while to research. And I thought this would be a great opportunity to share with all of you in terms of how to approach that. When I speak to a lot of MBA applicants, alumni, and also prospective students, a lot of the questions arise around the exam. I've spoken to many students from top-tier schools who have taken the GMAT many times in order to get the score they wanted, so it is definitely not an easy task. A lot of the component is very similar to the other standardized tests like SAT and GRE, but in my opinion, GMAT primarily focuses on your logical reasoning skills. It is a 3.5-hour long exam. There is a huge quantitative section where you do have to learn math. And then there's a verbal section where you have to interpret passages that were given, and there's finally a grammar section. You can choose to start with either the verbal section or the math section, and then followed by writing and integrated reasoning. For verbal and for math, there is no typical order. Some people like to tackle the one that they're good at first, which is what I did. On all my practice exams, I always scored higher in the verbal section than the math section, so I decided to start with verbal so that I can be confident about the results, and then I moved on to the math section. It works differently for everybody, so I would recommend, once again, practice a couple of exams just to see what you're most comfortable with. Writing as well as integrated reasoning sections are generally considered the optional sections, which we can talk about more in detail in the next video. And just a couple of tips around GMAT. I had not taken an exam in 6 years' time. That may not sound like a crazy amount, but I can tell you,
your brain is wired differently.
My first advice for anyone who's considering an MBA at some point is to take the GMAT as early as possible. The score currently still lasts for 5 years, so you can take the exam and then have 5 years to research and decide whether you want to go for an MBA program. Of course, you have to pay for the test fee and sometimes preparation and courses, but in hindsight, it was all worth it. And the second tip is around discipline and how you plan your schedule to work on it. For me, knowing that SAT was certainly not my forte, I made sure that I actually prepared for GMAT as thoroughly as possible. I started about 2 months before the exam date, and for the first month, I was really trying to get through the weekly learning on my own, watching videos, buying the GMAT textbooks, which you've seen, thick, very, very thick textbooks, doing the problem sets, understanding the test structure, see which areas you need to work harder on to understand the material. The second month of my preparation was really just drills and also training your brain muscle. For example, I was pretty much forcing myself every day after work in the evenings to spend half an hour to an hour to do the practice questions, making sure I go through them under the time limit. The closer you get to the exam, the more realistic you want it to be. I also did a boot camp in Hong Kong, and it was basically 2 Saturdays, 8 hours from morning to late afternoon. The teacher will split the review into a couple of different sections, answer your questions, and also share some tips around how the test works mechanically, which I thought was helpful. It was not a cheap preparation program. I spent about 8,000 Hong Kong dollars, which is 1,000 US dollars for those 2 entire days. I think that was worth it because I would rather do that and work a little bit harder later on to earn the money back than having to spend another couple of weeks and hours into preparing for the exam and taking the exam. One tip that I remembered that I hadn't gotten before was the fact that you should really try to sleep well, not only the night before, but the night before that. That is enough for GMAT. Woo! This is giving me flashbacks that I do not want to remember. Now let's move on to the fun part. Let's talk a little bit about getting to the application stage. I don't want to go straight from GMAT into application because I had a lot of time in between those things that allow me to do a lot more research and also a lot more self-reflection before I actually get to the application. Research and outreach, super helpful in terms of your decision factor. Many of you will be applying to many schools. It's important to use this period of time to make sure that you pick the right one. For me, a couple of things very important for the research and outreach period, which I would highly recommend. Attend as many admissions events as possible for all the schools that are potentially on the radar. I ended up only applying to 3 schools, but I've attended the admissions event for at least 10 schools just to get a sense of which school really aligns with my goal. That goes back to many ways of thinking about approaching MBA, whether you want a career advancement or pivot, which is what I'm doing, or whether you just want to upskill. You're sponsored by your company, so you're just here to have fun and you want to have interesting classmates, or you're interested in entrepreneurship and you're here to explore your options. All of these come into consideration, and going through different admissions events will really help you understand the strengths of each school and how you see yourself fitting into that community. It is 2 years of your time. Time is the most precious thing. So make your decisions wisely. Other than admissions event, the number 2 important element is really going through the school's websites. All the MBA programs in the US and generally in the world disclose number 1, the class profile of each year, and number 2, the employment report of each class. When I was going through the MIT Sloan website in terms of the class profile, a couple of things stood out to me. The diversity. In my year, we had over 40 nationalities. In my year, we had over 60 nationalities and also 40% international students. That is very important to me because diversity and inclusion has been a huge theme in my entire career, and I want to make sure that I am in a similarly international and diverse environment during my MBA experience. So if that's something that matters to you, definitely look out for the class profile. Other than nationality, the undergraduate major split also stood out to me in MIT Sloan. We have usually around 30% of the students who had their undergraduate degree in engineering, which is something that's really unique to me as I wanted to pivot into tech. So that's another signal to me that I will be able to meet many people with technical background, which is a huge compliment to my career and my skill sets. You can look at the employment report, which will help you understand where students interned, where students worked full-time after their MBA, and just to give you a sense of what the school is really good at. And for MIT Sloan, many people end up going into tech, entrepreneurship, and of course, consulting and investment banking track as well available. Another thing to look out for, in my opinion, on the school website is really finding the keywords for you to identify what the school is looking for. MIT, I think they changed the website slightly, but principles still remain. Currently, I just went through the website and then found that they reiterated a few things. For example, MIT Sloan is about invention. invention or invent has been mentioned many times throughout the website. The school is really looking for people who are able to come up with new ideas and challenge the status quo. Some other more directly phrased evidence that you can find include MIT students are informed and responsible global citizens with the vision, drive, and practical experience to make significant contributions to their organizations in the world. Also, they're looking for people who are independent, authentic, and this one is my favorite, fearlessly creative. While this might sound a little bit cheesy, I can tell you for sure that this is exactly what the school is looking for, and this is exactly the kind of people that you will see in your program. Now, going back to the research before my application, one thing that I also did excessively was to go on LinkedIn and do my research about a lot of the alumni and current students. For me, the primary goal was to look at what they did before going into MBA at a specific school, in my case MIT Sloan, and I found that a lot of our career paths actually overlapped. I worked in financial services, clean energy, media, and having worked with a big global organization is something that's unique to me. I actually saw that in a lot of the current students and alumni at MIT Sloan. That actually helps you evaluate your chance of getting into a specific school. And also, I of course look at the students' post-MBA career path, job function, companies, roles, geography. While you don't have to follow anybody's path, it gives you a good sense of where most people go, and likely if you're surrounded by people in that world, you will be able to either get opportunities or knowledge about that path. I reached out to a number of people. I got a lot of positive response. After every chat, I always ask myself, did I learn something new or interesting from this person? Did I enjoy the conversation? Do I want to grab a beer or have a drink with this person? Will this kind of person have a positive influence on me and my career? On the application, this is very subjective. It's my experience, how I approach the application. It's not indicative of what the school is looking for exactly. I do not have their formula. I don't know if there's a formula. This is just to share how I approached some of the elements of the MIT Sloan application and what I loved or didn't like so much about it. One thing you might have noticed is that MIT Sloan application does not include one of those essays that ask you about your ambition, your goal, and your big dream in the world. To be honest, I love that. It is true that some people have found their passion probably before they even know how to speak, but for most of us, there are a lot of things that we're exploring at this stage, and that's actually a primary reason why we wanted to explore MBA. They do ask for a cover letter, which initially I thought was
piece of cake. I've done this many times.
But actually, it was harder than I thought because you only have very limited space to tell your entire professional story. There's a tendency of overloading data, overloading information into that one page. One thing I would like you to keep in mind is that even though it's a cover letter, it's supposed to be professional and your purpose of wanting a seat in the classroom is very clear, still make it a storytelling assignment. Think about what kind of message do you want to convey through this cover letter? What qualities or interesting facts and experiences about you that you want the person reading to take away from? What kind of examples and achievement will really feed into the image that you want to create? This is not to say that you should come up with a character that's not you or a character that's so far from who you really are, because we're all multidimensional. Sometimes you get carried away by wanting to share everything about you, but rather than having a clear theme, something that will make an impression. Keep in mind, MIT Sloan has an acceptance rate, generally about 10 to 15%. And that means you are competing against many thousands of applications. Having a clear story and articulate why this MBA fits in your professional development and story would really help. For me personally, there are a couple of points that I highlighted, which again, food for thought for your consideration. Number one is my ability to navigate a complex global organization, as all my past experiences were rooted in large corporations, private sector, instead of, for example, public sector or startups. So I really highlighted that experience and how that can be beneficial in the MBA program. Also, I highlighted my leadership experience as a manager and also how that's meaningful to me. unique feature in the MIT Sloan application is the org chart. I don't have a ton to comment on that one. Go through the website, the instruction is very, very clear. I tend to want to keep it clean. If you work in a huge organization, try to see if there's a way to articulate where you are in the organization in a very visually clean way. Academics is something that I noticed is quite unique to MIT Sloan's application. You will be asked whether you've taken calculus. That was a little bit of a surprise to me. Luckily, I've taken most of the classes that they've asked for during my undergrad years. But I think if you don't have those classes or experiences, try to see if you have any professional certificates or actually outside evidence to support that you have that sort of quantitative skills. Especially for me, having not come from an engineering or quantitative or data-heavy background based on my resume, I definitely wanted to highlight in my courses that I have these sets of skills and I am able to keep up with the quantitatively intensive core semester, which I'm in now. And I can tell you, I now understand why they ask, because you will need those basic skills to tackle all the classes this semester, which again is very data and quantitative driven. And the next component is my absolute favorite in the application. Speaking to camera was not something that was unnatural to me, and I actually quite enjoyed doing it. The 60-second or 1-minute video that MIT Sloan asks is really a great opportunity for you to showcase your personality and all the other aspects that have not been covered in your application. I will show you my 60-second video at the end of this video, so do stay with me until the end. For this particular part, I have a couple of suggestions for you to think about. I always write down my script when I talk to the camera. Well, I guess not quite right now. But you do want to write down a script for that 60 seconds. Read it as many times as possible so that you can train your muscles again to be able to speak about it fluently without filler words, without forgetting it, or without just being nervous when you're being recorded. Also, I would recommend finding a background that really speaks to the story that you're telling. I have classmates who have done this recording in the mountains if they love hiking, or in their bedroom if they have some instruments to showcase, or in a chicken farm if that speaks to their story. Really be creative about it, but really be thoughtful about how to align the content that you're conveying to the background. Just keep in mind that the admissions committee will be watching thousands of these videos. What is just 1 or 2 things you want them to remember about you? It doesn't have to be something out of your reach, but something that you enjoy doing, that you find interesting, and that's really you. Finally, the interview process. The MIT Sloan interviews are all conducted by admissions committee members, to my knowledge. I actually enjoy that because you know that the process is very standardized and all of these committee members are very, very experienced. My interview was just about 20 minutes, which is a little bit under the 30 minutes that we've booked. Do not freak out if your interview went really short or really long. It's not technically indicative of your chance of being admitted. The most important thing is to prepare for the interview, make sure you convey the messages that you intend to convey, and make sure you answer the questions clearly and consistently with your application. In terms of the pre-interview questions, which you will receive a week before the interview, you will be given 2 essay questions to write about. 1 related to data, 1 usually related to diversity and inclusion, at least for my year. Again, don't stress about it, but do try to be creative about your answers. Go through some YouTube videos, which I watched a ton of. Look through the resources that are already online, for example, Clear Admin, to get some ideas of how people approach these problems in the past. If you get in, I believe you will get a call from your admissions member who interviewed you to congratulate you. For me, I was actually waitlisted in round 2 and got in round 3. I was invited to actually the waitlisted candidate chat where they shared more information on how the waitlist process works. It was a painful time to wait for your decision without knowing where you might go, but I think it was a really good time for me to really reflect on what I want in my life. So it turned out to be a beneficial decision, but if you're not comfortable with that, I'd highly encourage you to explore some of the other options. For me, luckily, they told us a date when they will start releasing waitlist candidate results on a rolling basis. I actually got my results exactly on that date that was given. I was able to make my decision pretty quickly after that. is Minnie from Hong Kong. A fun fact about me, I love my morning coffee with Oatly, which is in fact a fearless brand that drives emissions reduction in the agriculture sector. Fearless and creative with over a decade of international footprints in the US, Canada, and Singapore, just like Oatly, I now challenge myself every day as a sales manager with Bloomberg New Energy Finance in Hong Kong. After working with so many bright minds in renewable energy and climate tech, I learned to create effective business strategies and scale innovative and sustainable products that can improve lives. I also learned that good ideas become even better with diverse perspectives and collaboration, which I'm so excited to find at MIT Sloan as it brings together driven, responsible, and forward-looking leaders from all over the world. I can't wait to catch up with you and share my cross-cultural experience and leadership over a good coffee, a hike, a hip-hop dance class, or drone flying adventures to take photos like these. See you in the